Okay, what you're going to learn in this tutorial is how to retopologize a male body mesh. You are going to learn how to set up your retopology in a way where you have loops going around muscle groups that are effective for your animate. If you choose to animate the character, for the character to animate properly, you're going to learn how to UV map your character by learning how to put in UV seams. If you look at this character right here, as well as this character right here, this is a high poly mesh right here. This is a low poly mesh. This mesh right here has almost 1,000,000 polygons. If I left click and then go to edit mode, you can see the density of the mesh. If you look beneath my triangle, you can see this has 953,040 triangles, right? I'm going to click to go back to object mode. So here is our low poly mesh that has been retopologized. Another thing you're going to learn is how to put a normal map on your retopologized mesh. So this is a low poly mesh that has a normal map on it, right? So I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to left click to the upper left, go to edit mode, and here you can see beneath my mouse this has 3,163 triangles in it. So I'm going to click to go back to object mode. So that's what you're going to learn today as you work your way through this tutorial. Hi, this is Ali Arango of LittleGuyCGI.com, and today I'm going to show you how to retopologize a male body in a Blender 2.8 beta. So let's get started. Okay, what you see in front of you are the results of some other tutorials. I'll put links up so you can get to those tutorials. The one tutorial showed you how to sculpt the main mesh. Another tutorial showed you how to retopologize the head. You'll also be able to get to this sculpt and download it by going to littleguycgi.com. Okay, for this tutorial, we're trying to retopologize the body. The main reason we're trying to do that is this is a sculpt right here. We want to make this so that this is set up for animation. And when I say this, I mean this sculpted body here. Okay, as we work our way through this tutorial, we're using the basic tools and things as far as add-ons that are included in Blender. We're not using any additional things that you have to bring into Blender to do this retopology process. Okay, if you're somehow watching this video and you're like, well, what's the deal? Retopology. This right here is a retopology mesh, right? If I click here, go to object mode, I click on our sculpt. This body was made from a sculpt. And then I go to edit mode. You see how the topology is for this. And long story short, this just is not ideal for animation. This is a lot of geometry. And just compare this to this. Okay, also if you're new to Blender, sculpting, or retopology, you might sit there and say, why not just make this body like this? And the answer to that is you have a lot more freedom. You can think more artistically as you're sculpting compared to box modeling is how you would do things typically or how I would do things typically if I weren't sculpting. So this gives you freedom working like this. However, the price of that freedom is you have to do retopology to make your mesh so it is animatable. Generally, when I make meshes, I'm thinking in terms of animation. So I just want to give you some explanation if you're new to Blender, new to Retopology, of why even going through this process. For me, I when I first saw people sculpting, I was like, why sculpt when you have to do when I saw Retopology, I was kind of like, you're doing the same thing twice, and it took me a while to realize that you had a lot of freedom here, that this gave you better results. When I say this, I mean sculpting. And then, you could use a retopology process to then, lay out mesh like this that was animatable. And then you could use things like normal maps to be able to pretty much get the detail from this onto a mesh like this. Okay, so with all of that being said, I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom. I'm holding Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. The first thing we want to do is we're going to use these two edges here. We're going to bring these edges down the body and then up the other side to connect back to this mesh right here. Okay, the geometry that we're going to make like that, that's going to come down and go around. That's going to be the base for the rest of our work. The process I'm showing you is my own process. There's many different ways of doing retopology. This is my way of doing it. Okay, before we get started, we need to split this mesh in half. So what we're going to do is I'm going to press 1 on my number keypad. I'm going to go to view point. By the way, if you don't have a number keypad, you could go to this view, just click front to go there. What we're going to do is go to local view and then select toggle local view. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to hold shift, we're going to press Z. This takes us into x-ray mode. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're on face select. We're going to press B for box select. I'm going to come up to this corner like this. I'm going to left click and drag slightly more than the halfway point. Then I'm going to let go. So we have this extra piece right here we have to deal with now as far as selecting. Okay, one way to deal with that is you're going to press B for box select. You're going to, now after pressing B for box select, I'm not clicking on anything. My hands are off the keyboard as well as the mouse. Now I'm going to left click and hold the middle mouse button. And you see that drawing box went away. Now I'm redrawing a box. I'm holding down the middle mouse button, coming over, just grabbing these edges I don't want or faces I don't want, and then letting go. It didn't work. When I hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in, letting go of Control as well as the middle mouse button, holding Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan down. Now I'm letting go of everything. I'm going to press B for box select. I'm going to press the middle mouse button a second. Now I'm pressing it now. So you see that disappeared, that those indicators that we had box select. I'm holding down the middle mouse button. While holding down, I'm redrawing the box. And now I deselected that geometry right there. I just let go of the middle mouse button as well. Okay, we're going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. Okay, so with this selected, we're going to press X to bring up our delete menu. We're then going to choose faces to delete. Okay, the reason why we were in X-ray mode was so we could select the front of the face as well as the back of the face. We don't need to be in that mode anymore, so we're going to hold Shift, press Z. Now what we're going to do is we're going to left click and then go to object mode. Okay, what we want to do now is click on our wrench, which is our modifier menu. We're going to click add modifier. We're going to select to add a mirror modifier on. This duplicates this geometry to the other side. We're going to put a check mark next to clipping. We're then going to go to view. Oh, not there. We're going to go to local view, toggle local view. Now we're going to go to the upper left. We're going to left click and then select edit mode. Okay, so we're going to hold Control, hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm holding control again while holding the middle mouse button to zoom in. When I said hold control, typically I'll use control as well as the middle mouse button. So I'll hold control, hold the middle mouse button, I'll push my mouse up or down. That allows me to zoom in and out. That allows me to do a smooth zoom. You can also roll your mouse to zoom in or out. However, holding control as well as holding the middle mouse button allows you to smoothly zoom in, smoothly zoom out, which I find to be very useful. Okay, we're going to go to our mirror modifier. We're going to click on this, looks like this triangular looking button. We are going to go to the upper middle part of our screen, turn on this magnet. This enables snapping. Snapping is the main thing that makes the retopology process work. We're going to click the button next to it. We're going to make sure this face is on. We're also going to make sure we have a check mark next to project individual elements. Okay, we're going to temporarily turn off clipping. We're going to go to edge select. We did that by going to our upper left-hand corner. We're going to select this edge here, right towards the center of the neck. I'm holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold control and then right click. And when I hold control and right click, Blender will make our geometry go right to where my mouse is at. So I'm holding control, then right clicking again. Right clicking again, holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold control, then right click again. Okay, if you're wondering why am I coming away from the center line, I find that we can push this together. I want these to be lined up on the center line. However, when you're working on this initial geometry, I find it easier to make sure that you have your geometry away from the center line and then push your geometry towards the center line after you have your basic setup. So I'm going to hold the middle mouse button like this. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold control, now right clicking. When I right click, I am able to have Blender extrude the geometry right to where my mouse is at. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate to the side. There's a way in Blender to limit your view. This is extremely useful for working with retopology. Okay, I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan up. I'm holding the middle mouse button to get a side view. What we want to do is just see the back of this mesh. So we're going to hover our mouse above the head. We're going to hold Alt, press B. We're going to left click and drag. And when we did that, we can only see what was inside of the box that we drew after pressing Alt as well as B. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button. Make sure we're still on the edge select. Then I'm going to hold control. Still holding control, and I'm just right clicking. So I held control, right clicked, held control again, and right clicked. I'm holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Now I let go of that. I'm holding control to right click, control to right click. As far as the sections, I'm really not concerned about that right now. I was just concerned about getting them up to the point where I can, working with them so I get them around the body. I'm going to hold shift, select here, and then with this edge select as well as that edge, I'm going to press F to fill. I'm now going to left click to deselect. Okay, so now that we have this connecting line, we're going to turn clipping back on. We're going to make sure we're on edge select. We're going to push. Okay, so I'll go to, when I push these, they're like overlapping. So I'm going to push this vertice towards itself. I'm going to go back to edge. And there we go. So we're pushing the edge towards the center line. holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Now I'm left clicking to deselect. Okay, to come out of that view mode, I'm going to hold Alt, then press B, and that brings me out of that view mode. Okay, now I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate towards the front. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. You should be aware, by the way, that some of these viewing options, the way I can see the mesh over the geometry is if you click here, scroll down, I have this check mark here next to in front. If I turn that off, you can see how the geometry of our retopology mesh goes into the geometry of our sculpted mesh. When I click this in front back on, we can clearly see the retopology mesh. Okay, so with edge select on, I'm going to go to Vertex select, click here, push this over like that. Left click on nothingness. I'm going to go to edge select, click here, push this over, click here, push that over. I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, this right here, I'm going to click here, press G, just to try to get that to snap. Let's go to Vertex select. Just push this more towards the center line. For these sections, I'm going to hold Control, press, just to make them have more geometry, more evenly spaced. I'm just Control R and then left clicking. I roll the mouse wheel once there. I'm going to left click a second time to lock that in. Control R. Left click a second time to lock that in. Control R, roll the mouse once. Left click a second time to lock that in. Hover here, Control R. Roll the mouse wheel, left click once. Left click a second time to lock that in. Now I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, with Vertex select on, let's hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to zoom down. We can hold Shift and press B, draw a zoom box that allows us to zoom in. So what we're going to do is click this geometry here. This is from our Mirror Modifier, by the way, if you're like, why is that not, this is from the work we did on the Mirror Modifier. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button. We're just pushing these, pushing or pulling them. To make sure that they are together. I left clicked on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button. Pan, zoom in. Same thing, just pushing these vertices together. Hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan when I do pan. Hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to hold Control, press R. hold Control, press R to put a loop cut right here. Left click, hold Control, press R to put a loop cut right here. Hold Control, press R to put a loop cut right there. Hold Control, press R to put a loop cut here. Hold Control, press R to put a loop cut there. Hold Control, press R. Hold Control, press R. Left click to deselect. Just wanted more geometry there. Okay, we're going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to hover here, hold Alt, press B, left click. So I can see just the front. I do this so I can't see the back geometry. So this works well for that. Okay, so we're going to go to Edge Select. We're going to click right here. We're clicking right here because see this edge right here? We want to start bringing that edge out. So we're going to hold Control, then right click. I'm going to press S to scale. Hold Control. Hold Control. And we're basically just thinking of fairly even spacing right here. I have the middle mouse button to rotate, holding Control, right clicking, holding Control, right clicking, holding Control, right clicking, letting go of Control now. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to hold Alt B to bring back our hidden geometry. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I want just this geometry right here as far as seeing. So I'm going to hold Alt, press B. And now we can see this right here, which is what we want. Okay, we have edge select on. We want this edge that's actually going to let us drag out and be on top of the shoulder, where if we came from here, we would like be off the shoulder and then coming onto the shoulder. So I'm going to click here, and I'm just saying that so you know, like, why did I choose this instead of this? I'm choosing this because this is like coming out on the shoulder. So I'm going to hold Control, then right click, still holding Control, right click, right click, right click. I'm going to hold Alt, press B to unhide the geometry. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, we're still on edge select. We're going to left click here, hold Control, hold the mouse button to rotate the view. See how when I rotate, like, see like this view here, I'm like right on top of this other geometry, but if I hold the mouse button, I still see the geometry. However, I'm not like on top of it. That helps when you're doing retopology like this. So I'm holding Control, right clicking, being conscious of the fact that there's no other geometry as far as the current retopology geometry that we have. So that's what I'm doing here. Those are my thoughts, and I'm moving the view and kind of like dodging this with the view. Holding Control. Oh, here we go. Now holding Control, right clicking. Wasn't actually selected on a piece of geometry. Right clicking, holding Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold Control, then right click. Now what I'm going to do is go to Vertex Select. Click on this vertex and then right click. I'm going to left click here, hold Control, right click. So I'm going to hold Shift, then press F to fill. I'm going to click here, press X, delete this vertex. I'm going to hold Shift, click here, holding Shift still. I held the middle mouse button. I let go of Shift to turn to rotate the view with the middle mouse button. I'm holding Shift again now. Holding Shift, holding Shift. Now I'm going to press F to fill there. I'm going to left click to deselect now. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Just taking a look. Okay, I'm going to hover here, hold Control, press R. I'm going to left click again. Hold Shift. While holding Shift, I'm clicking these vertices. I'm then going to press F to fill. I'm going to left click to deselect now. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. We're on Vertex Select. I'm going to left clear. I rotated the view so I have, just this. I can't see, to this. So I rotated the view so I can work without doing the mesh towards the back. The plan is just to line up vertices going here. So I'm going to hold Control, right click, right click, right click, right click, right click. I let go of Control. Okay, with Vertex Select on, I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. This is interesting. Okay. Okay, I'm going to left click here, hold Shift. Still holding Shift, so I click there. Now I'm holding Shift, still holding Shift. Then I'm going to press F to fill. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to go to Edge Select, hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Rotating again so I see just this and not, what's behind. I'm going to click here, press F, 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 F. Blender filled that in nicely for us. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. So what I'm going to do is see if we can use grid fill to fill this geometry in. So I'm going to Edge Select on. I'm going to hold Alt Select here. When I do that, I'm looking underneath my my mouse. See where you see verts? So that looks like there's 18 verts there, which are even verts, which is good. So what I'm going to do is go to Vertex Select. I'm going to hold Control, press F. This brings up our face menu. I'm going to select Grid Fill. Okay, and that worked well. Then I'm going to press G, then left click to get that geometry to stick to our sculpted mesh. I'm going to left click here to deselect. Okay, one of the ways we can check to see if this loop is going how we want is we can go to Face Select, hold Alt, and then select here. So I want this loop to run up around here. See how it's stopping there? I don't want that. So I'm going to left click here to deselect. Okay, with that Face Select on, I'm going to click here, hold Shift, then click here. I'm going to press X to bring up the delete menu. Then I'm going to choose faces to delete. I'm going to go to Vertex Select. I'm going to click, hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm taking this vertex here, pushing this down here, right? So now I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in, hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to click here, hold Shift, click here, here, as well as here. Then I'm going to press F to fill that in. I'm then going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to go back to face select. I'm going to hold Alt, then select here. And now you can see this comes and this runs around. It doesn't just stop there. It comes and it, flows up towards this direction here. Now I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, so I want this loop to come up and then flow this direction. So I have face select on. I'm going to hold Alt, and you can see this goes up here. So basically, I want the turn to happen here, right? So one of the ways you can do this is the turn, I want it to happen here, so I can look to this face as well as this face here, and then delete them. So I'll click here, hold Shift, select there, then press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose faces to delete. Okay, so see this corner, how this goes here. I want this to go here, right? So you can look to the corner here. So I want this to flow here. So I'm going to go to Vertex Select, look for the corner here, pull this corner down like this. I'll hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. So I'll left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click here to the upper left, hold Shift and click here. I'm now going to hold Alt, press M, and then select at center to merge those vertices there. I'm going to hold Alt, press A, hold Control. Okay, I'm going to left click here, hold Shift, still holding Shift. I'm clicking these vertices. I'm letting go of Shift. I'm going to press F to fill, and then I'm going to left click here to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to go to face select. Now I'm going to hold Alt and then left click here. And now you can see we have the flow going around and then, in this direction. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button, rotate the view. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom the view. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view again. Okay, so we're going to make sure we're on face select. We want this to come into here. So to do this, we're going to click here, hold Shift. So we're selecting these three. This is virtual geometry. We're then going to press the X button, and then this brings up our delete menu. We're then going to choose faces to delete. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to go to Vertex Select. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to left click here, hold Control, then right click here. Okay, see this vertex as well as this vertex? I want this to go like this. So imagine there being a line here, and then imagine this line is aiming to this line here. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how I'm thinking as far as making this flow from here. So imagine there being a line here and we're aiming for right there, right? So with that being said, we left click here, hold Shift, click here, here. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Then we click here. Then with that done, we press F to fill. And then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, now with that done, with vertex select still selected, we're going to click here to bring our manipulator back. That was those vertices there look kind of not right. That's why I grabbed there, moved this. And then what we're going to do for here is we want there to be 4 vertices when possible. This, we're going to click here to connect there. We have our 4 here, so we're going to hold Shift and then press F to fill there. We're then going to, I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect up. We're going to click here, hold Shift, and then press F to fill there. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, with that done, I'm going to hold Ctrl as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to go to Face Select. I'm going to hold Alt, and now we can see we have this flowing around here. However, we have an issue here. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to hold Control, zoom in, make sure we have Face Select on, which we do. We're going to click here, hold Shift, and click here. We're then going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose Faces to delete. Okay, I'm going to go to Edge Select, left click here, hold Shift. While holding Shift, click here as well as here. I'm then going to press F to fill. I'm then going to left click to deselect. I'm going to go to Vertex Select. I'm going to hold Shift, push this down. I'm going to left click here, hold Shift, click here, here, as well as here. I'm then going to press F to fill. I'm then going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to select this vertex, bring that to the side, push this down, something like this. Click here, push this down, push this over. Click here, push this over. Push this down. Left click to deselect. Okay, now I'm going to go to Face Select, hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view, hold Alt. Click here, and we can see that this goes right along like it should now. So I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click to select Vertex Select. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I just held the middle mouse button to rotate the view just so I could just see this mesh and not the geometry that's in the back. I'm going to left click here. The reason why I'm left clicking here is I want to have geometry go this way. So I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button, then push in to zoom in. I'm going to hold Control. I'm then going to right click. And I right click just so I could start this geometry that's going to curve around this way. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is click this vertex here, hold Control, and then right click here. So now I'm going to left click here, hold Shift, still holding Shift, select these 4 vertices, then press F to fill. I'm then going to left click here, hold Shift. I'm going to left click here, so I've just this vertex here selected now. I'm going to hold Control, then right click here. I'm going to hold left click here, now holding Shift. And now I'm letting go of Shift and pressing F to fill. I'm then going to left click here to deselect. Okay, I'm going to click here, hold Control. Then while holding Control, I'm going to right click. I'm then going to left click here, hold Shift, left click here, here as well as here. I'm then going to press F to fill. I'm then going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. There's a tool in Blender 2.8 called the Poly Build tool, which is right here. This tool is very useful for retopology. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. And with this tool on, when we have faces like this, what we can do is click right here on this vertex and then just left click and drag out. So now we have a whole new face. So I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. So see how there's a corner here? We're going to do the same thing. We'll left click and drag. And we have this whole new face right there. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. So what we're going to do here is, you can see how when we hover, when we have that tool on, when we hover over different pieces of geometry, the pieces are highlighted. We're going to go to this corner here, left click and drag. So we have this face here like that. Go to this corner, left click and drag like that. Hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse buttons as well as the Control key to zoom back. I'm going to go to Edge Select. I'm going to click here. Get away from the Poly Build tool. Now I'm looking here. I'm going to hold Control, then right click. Holding the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to right click. Right click. Right click, and I'm adjusting the view just to work as best as possible without being distracted by the geometry I see in the back. I'm going to hold Control, then right click. Hold Control, right click, and I'm going to hold Shift, click here, then press F to fill in that geometry. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Go to Edge Select. I'm going to keep this in my mind right here. I'm kind of looking here. I'm going to right click, basically looking over towards here. Right click. Then I'm going to hold Shift, then press F to fill. Then I'm going to left click on nothing, and that's to deselect. Okay, what I'm going to do is go to Vertex Select. I'm going to hold Alt, then select here. I select there because I wanted to see if we have an equal number of vertices. The reason why I'm looking for an equal number is to see that if we could use grid fill to possibly fill this in. So I'm thinking we can left click on nothingness to deselect, hover here, hold Control, press R, left click once. Because I left click once, I can move this loop cut. Then I'm going to left click a second time to lock that in. And then going to left click on nothingness to deselect, hold Alt, click this edge. Because I'm holding Alt, I select that entire edge loop. I'm looking down near the bottom of the screen where it says verts 14. These are even verts, so now I'm going to hold Control, press F, see if we can use grid fill to fill this area in. I'm going to select grid fill, and that worked. Okay, I'm going to press G just to make sure this is this new geometry is snapped to our mesh. I'm then going to go to Vertex, go down to Smooth Vertices, and then I can I smooth these vertices. Now I can hold Shift and then press R. I didn't press that yet. I'm about to, and that will repeat the smooth vertices process. So I'm going to hold Shift, press R, 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 just to smooth those vertices out. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, there's a loop that we want to make sure this is a proper loop that comes around and runs here. So we're going to go to Face Select. We're going to select here, hold Shift, select here, as well as here. We're then going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose Faces to delete. Okay, I'm going to go to vertex select. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to left click here, hold Control, then right click here. Now I'm going to left click here, hold Shift, click here, here, as well as here. And then I'm going to press F to fill. Now I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Click here, here, here. I'm holding Shift while I'm doing this. Then here. Then I'm going to press F to fill that area in. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, we can make sure this is a proper loop is I'm going to hold the middle mouse button, so let's Control to zoom back. We'll go to face select. We'll hold Alt, then we'll left click here, and we can see that this is going, you know, right around like it should go. So we're going to left click on nothingness to deselect. And so we'll hold the mouse button to rotate the view. What we'll do here is hover here, hold Control, press R. Left click once, left click a second time to lock that in. Left click on nothingness to deselect. We'll left click here, hold Shift, click here. Then we'll press F to fill. Then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, we try to use the loops to guide how to help muscles and how they look. So we have a lat muscle here, right? So these faces come down. The bottom of the lat muscle comes out here, goes around. So what we can do is we can go to edge select, left click here, hold Control, and we'll just be aware of where these faces are at as we go around our shape. Press S to scale, right click here, right click here. I'm going to hold Shift, then press F to fill that area in there, and then I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate. Now we'll go to vertex select and we'll click here, just adjust that some. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate, holding Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom out, then left clicking on nothingness to deselect. Okay, with vertex select on, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to left click here. I'm going to hold Control, then right click. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Hold Control, right click. Hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. Hold Control, then right click. So with that done, I am going to left click here just to move the manipulator temporarily. I'll click here to temporarily hide the manipulator. I'm rotating the view just so I can get a clear view right here. I'm going to press F to fill, left click, go to edge select. I'll click here. I'll press F and then F. I'll then left click here as well as here, and then press F. Then left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click here, go to our poly build select. I'm going to left click here and drag out here. And then I'm going to left click back here. I'll then hold Shift, left click here, here as well as here. Then I'll press F to fill, then left click to deselect. I'll hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'll click back on the poly build tool. I'll left click here, drag this out like that. Click here, hold Shift. Click while holding Shift, I'll click here as well as here. Then I'll press F to fill. I'll left click to deselect. Trying to rotate the view. If you have issues rotating the view, you can come here, rotate the view here instead. I'll go back to our poly build tool. I'll left click here. I'll just drag that out. I'll left click here to deselect. I'm going to click here. This part popped out. I'll press G just to get that to snap. I'll left click here, hold shift and, oh wait a second. Yeah, okay. Hold shift, click here, then press F to fill, then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I will click here, hold shift, click here, here as well as here. Hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan view. I'll press F to fill. I'll then left click to deselect. I'll hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'll click here, hold shift, click here. Not there. So I'll left click here, hold shift, click here, here. As well as I'm not sure what's going on with this. So I'll left click, I'll deselect. I'm looking at this shape right there. So I'm gonna go to face select. I'll click here, press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose faces to delete. So I'm gonna go to the poly build here. Click here. I'll click here. This selected, I'll hold shift, click here, as well as here, as well as here, press F to fill. Left click on nothingness to deselect. To fill in this area here, I'm going to hover here, hold Control, press R, left click once to, or left click again to lock that in. I'll click here, hold shift, click, left click. Click here, hold shift, press D, right click the manipulator, push this vertex over, left click here, hold shift, hold the middle mouse button to rotate, I'll click here, hold shift, then I'll press F to fill there, left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'll click here, hold shift, click here, press F to fill, then left click on nothingness to deselect. I'll click here, hold shift, press F to fill, click here, hold shift, then press F to fill, then left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Go to face select, I'll click here, press G, get this to snap. I'm going to hover here, hold Control, press R. Left click once, left click a second time, then I'll press G, then left click to get that to snap. I'll go to Edge Select, left click on nothingness to deselect. I'll click here, hold Control, then right click. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view, right click. I'm going to hold shift. Let's see. I'm going to hover here, hold Control, press R, left click again to deselect. Oh, I didn't deselect. I'm going to click here, hold shift and click here, then press F to fill. I'll then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, and I would like for this to be a loop here, so go to face select. We'll click here, hold shift, click here as well as here. We'll press X, bring up our delete menu, then choose faces to delete. Okay, I'll go to vertex select. I'll click here, pull that up. this down. I'll left click on nothingness to deselect, click here. On the edge select, click here, hold shift and click here. I'll then press F to fill, hover here, hold control, press R, then left click once, left click a second time to lock that in. I'll push that down some, I'll then left click to deselect. Okay, I'll left click here, hold shift, then click here. I'll then press F to fill, I'll then left click here to deselect. Okay, I'm going to go to Vertex, select, hold Alt, left click here. Look towards the bottom, we have 9 verts. I'll hover here, hold control, press R, left click again. Left click to deselect, hold Alt, left click here. Now if you look all the way near the bottom underneath my mouse, you can see we have 10 verts. Because we have 10 verts, we should be able to hold control, press F. This brings up our faces menu. We should be able to then select grid fill, and that worked. I took the span up to 2, so we have more geometry. I'm going to go to Vertex, Smooth Vertices. Now I'm going to hold Shift, press R, hold Shift, press R. Then I'm going to press G, then left click just so that geometry snaps like it's supposed to. Then I'll left click to deselect. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom out. Hold the middle mouse button to turn back towards the front. Taking a look at what we have here. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to click here as well as here and press F to fill. Click here as well as here, as well as here, as well as here, and press F to fill. Left click to deselect. I'm going to click, go to Edge Select. Click here. Right click. Press G to snap. Right click. Press S to scale. Go to Vertex Select. Go back to Edge Select, click here, hold Control, right click, hold Shift, then press F to fill. Left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to go to the Poly Build tool, go to Vertex Select. I'm going to left click and drag here like this. Click back on the Select tool. Then hold Shift, click here, as well as here, as well as here, then press F to fill, then left click to deselect. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. We'll hold Alt, left click here. See how many verts do we have? We have 12 verts, which means since we have even verts, we should be able to hold Control, press F, then select Grid Fill. So we have this. Let's try taking a span back one. That doesn't look that. Let's see. We'll take the span up. 3 looks better. 4 look. 3 looks better. We'll go to Vertex Select. Select Smooth Vertices. Hold Shift. Press R, Shift, press R, Shift, press R, then we'll press G, then left click to get that to snap, that being the geometry, left click to then deselect, so we left clicked on nothingness to deselect. Hold Control as well as the middle mouse button. Zoom back. Just take a look at what we have here. I'm going to go to face select, press C, select this, right click, then press G. Just trying to make sure this geometry is snapping here. Click here, press G. Okay. Just trying to make sure that's snapping. Put the edge select here. Manipulator. Oh, left click to deselect. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. Hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to go to Vertex Select. I'm going to click here, hold Shift, press D, right click. I just duplicated a vertex. So I'm going to left click here, left click there, hold Shift, then press F to fill. I'm going to left click here, go to the poly select tool, left click and drag like this. Hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Left click and drag like this. Left click and drag like that. Left click and drag like this. Left click and drag like that. Left click and drag. I'm dragging from the corner. The polygon select tool was or poly build select tool was making it extremely easy to just bring these faces out like this. Left click on nothingness to deselect. Oh, look at that. Click here. This right here, we're going to delete. I'm going to press X and choose vertices to delete. I'm holding the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to click here, hold Shift, click here, here as well as here, then press F to fill. I'm going to hold Alt, wrong loop, hold Alt, select here. We have 12 verts, so we're even, so let's hold Control, press F, select grid fill. Looks like that did a decent job, so we're going to go to Vertex, Smooth Vertices, hold Shift, press R, then press G, then left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click here, right here, hold Shift, click here, here as well as here, then press F to fill. I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to go to our poly build, left click and drag like this out. Then I'm going to click here, hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'll hold Shift and click here as well as here, as well as here. I'll then press F to fill. I'll then left click to deselect. I'll hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'll click here. I'll hold Control, then right click. Now I'll hold Shift and click here, as well as here, as well as here. Then press F to fill. Then left click to deselect. Just rotating the view, taking a look. I'm going to go to edge select. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan, hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in, looking at this shape here. So when I click here, hold control, then right click here. I'm going to hold control, right click here, still holding control, right clicking. Right clicking, paying attention right here. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hover here, hold control, press R, left click once, left click a second time to lock that in. Left click on nothingness to deselect. Click here, click the manipulator, push this down, hold shift, then click here. Then I'm going to press F to fill, then left click to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to go to our poly build tool, go to Vertex select, left click and drag out like this. I'm going to click here. Let's see if I put a loop cut here. Hold control, press R. Left click once. I'm going to hold control. Okay, that's good. I'm going to left click here. I'm going to go to edge select, click here, here as well as here, then press F to fill, and then going to left click to deselect. I'm going to go to Vertex select. I'm going to left click here, hold control, then right click, hold the middle mouse button to rotate, right click, left click here. I went here because sometimes I have issues with, I'll hold the middle mouse button and the view won't rotate. I'm going to hold control, press R, left click here, left click a second time to lock that in. I put this in so I can match up with this right here. I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate back towards here. I'm going to left click here, hold shift, click here, press F to fill, left click here. On nothingness to deselect, click here on this edge select, left click here. Then I'm going to press F, hold the middle mouse button, press F, and then, okay, well, it won't finish there, so I just have to hold shift here, click here, then press F. I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to click here, hold shift, go to Vertex select. I'm going to press F, left click here to deselect, go to edge select, click here, then press F, F, as well as F, and left click to deselect if anything was selected. Okay, I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button, just taking a look. Okay. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom. I'm going to go to Vertex select. I'm going to left click here, hold shift, still holding shift. Then I'm going to press F to fill. I'm then going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. We're going to go to Vertex select. We're on Vertex select. We're going to hold Alt. Trying to select this loop right here. We have 14 verts. If you look underneath my mouse towards the bottom of the screen, so we're going to left click to deselect. Okay, the reason why it's important to know that we have 14 verts is because we know that what we can do is go to object mode. We're going to click what looks like the magnet to turn off snapping. We're going to hold shift and then right click to put the 3D cursor here in Blender. Where the 3D cursor is at is where objects tend to come into Blender at. So what we're going to do is hold shift, press A. This brings up our add to menu. We're then going to go to cylinder. When we look to our left, we see these options for this cylinder. The vertices are 32. However, we want this to match how many vertices are in that loop that we just talked about, the 14 vertices. We're going to left click here. We're going to change this to 14. And then where we have this cap field type, this is the top as well as the bottom. See where it says Ngon? We want to left click here and we want to change this to nothing. So then I'm going to left click and now that menu goes away. Okay, what we're going to do is press S to scale on the Z axis to shorten our cylinder. We're going to hold the middle mouse button to turn to the side. We're going to press S to scale. We want to make sure that this cylinder is inside of our leg. We can click on what looks like the square. It's our object menu. We can put a check mark next to in front so we can clearly see the cylinder inside of the leg. Okay, we're going to go to edit mode. We're going to hold shift, press D, right click, go to our upper left, select the move tool, push this down, hold the middle mouse button to turn to the side. We want to make sure this is inside the leg. We're going to press S to scale. I'm holding the middle mouse button to turn back. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to hold shift, press D, right click, bring this down, hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I want to make sure this is inside of the leg. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back, hold shift, press D, right click, bring this down, press S to scale, and make sure that's inside of the leg. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, if you're wondering why I'm doing this, I find that when I try to just put a cylinder and try to have this go to the leg, the vertices tend to bunch up. They tend to stick in strange ways. By doing what we're about to do here, it just seems to make things simpler as well as faster. Okay, so with this setup, we're going to go to object mode. We're going to go to our wrench, our modifier menu. We're going to click add modifier. We're then going to select shrink wrap. Okay, this next part is why we wanted to make sure that these are actually inside of the volume of the leg. And what that is where we see nearest surface point, we want to select project. So now with that project on, we want to look to where we see on surface. We want to left click here, select above surface. And then what we want to do is click this ink dropper, and then we're going to click on our mesh, and the project makes, as you can see, it makes the pieces made from the cylinder match up well with our sculpted mesh. Okay, so with them matching up well, we're going to go and select apply. Now we're going to go to edit mode. Okay, with edit mode selected, we're going to go to edge select. We're going to hold Alt, left click here, hold Shift as well as Alt, then left click here. I'm letting go of Shift as well as Alt. Now I'm going to hold Control, press E. This brings up our edges menu. We're going to select bridge edge loops. I'm then going to left click to deselect. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hold Alt. When we hold Alt and click on an edge, we can select the whole edge loop. We're now going to hold Shift as well as Alt. We're holding Shift so that we can keep this selected while we select this edge loop. We're now going to hold Control, press E. This brings up our edges menu. We're then going to select bridge edge loops. We're then going to left click to deselect. Okay, here we're going to go to face select. We're going to hover here, press L. I'm going to hold shift, press D, right click. I'm going to push this down, press S to scale. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to go back to edge select. I'm going to hold Alt, left click here, hold shift while holding Alt, click there, hold Control, press E. This brings up our edges menu. I'm going to select bridge edge loops. I'm going to left click to deselect. We still have edge select on. We're going to hold shift. Oops, sorry, hold Alt. Now hold shift as well as Alt. Hold Control, press E. This brings up our edges menu. Select bridge edge loops. Left click to deselect. Okay, we're going to go to object mode. Click here. Make sure this is selected. On our modifier panel, we're going to click add modifiers. We're going to select shrink wrap. We're going to click nearest surface point, select project, go to on surface, select above surface, take the ink drop, we'll click on our sculpted mesh. We have this right here, which is interesting. So what we'll do is we'll just move this. If you move, as you saw me take the manipulator, move this up or down some, you can deal with that, what you just saw, where this was trying to go to the other leg. This being our, piece of retopology mesh that we're working on now. Okay, with this selected, we're going to right click. We're going to select shade smooth. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to edit mode. I'm going to put one loop cut here, Ctrl R. Left click once, left click again. I'm going to hover here, hold Control, press R, left click once, left click again. I'm going to go to Vertex Select. Press C. Okay, I'll go to Alt. I'm going to press G twice. So when I pressed G twice, I was able to slide this edge loop. So I was able to slide just this edge loop by itself. That allowed me to deal with that issue where this was trying to stick to the other leg. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, with that set up now, I'm going to click here, go to object mode. I'm going to click here just to see if there was any difference that we can see. We're going to left click to apply that modifier. Okay, what we're going to do now is, this order is important, so I'm going to left click off of this. We want to left click this first, this being our mesh here, hold shift and then left click on our retopology mesh. We're then going to hold Control, press J. And what that did was Control J joined this retopology mesh to here. The reason why we got this was this retopology mesh has a mirror modifier on it. So when we join this to here, this acquired the mirror modifier. Okay, I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan down. We're going to go to our upper left, select edit mode. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hold Alt, select right here. We're going to press G twice to slide this edge so we get some space between here. I'm going to hold Alt, left click here on this edge. I'm going to hold shift while holding Alt. We're currently on Vertex Select. I'm going to left click here. So we have this loop selected as well as this loop selected. Okay, when we made this cylinder with 14 vertices. The reason why we made this with 14 vertices was because we knew this loop cut had 14 vertices. With this loop cut here selected as well as this, we're going to go to our edge select. Okay, now we're going to hold Control, press E. This brings up our edges menu. We're then going to select Bridge Edge Loops. We're then going to left click to deselect. Okay, you can see Blender nicely joined up these two pieces for us. So now we're going to hold Control, press R, roll the mouse wheel once, left click once, left click again. I'm going to go to Vertex Select, go to Vertex. The menu, this is in the upper left corner. I'm then going to select Smooth Vertices. I'm then going to hold Shift, press R. To just smooth those vertices out. I'm going to hold Shift, press R a few more times. Okay, we're going to left click here. We're going to go to object mode. We're going to deal with that right there. And the way we can deal with that fairly easily is going to add modifier, go to shrink wrap. This time we're not going to use project. We're just going to click where we have on surface, select above surface, leave this at nearest surface point. Okay, then we're going to click the eyedropper, click our sculpted mesh. We're then going to click this triangle here. We'll click apply. Okay, we'll go to edit mode. It's near the upper left. We'll go to vertex select. And we'll hold shift as well as the middle mouse button. Zoom in. We'll grab these vertices, push them towards each other. Clicked over here just to move the manipulator so I could see. I'll left click to deselect. Gonna hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Similar thing going on in the back, fairly easy to fix. Just push those towards each other. Sometimes you have to pull them. That's what I'm doing right now. And basically what's going on is this clipping is making these vertices join together. Now left click to deselect. I'll click here. Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Left click to deselect up right here. Left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom out. Okay, what we're going to do is go to, well, not object mode yet. So we're going to look at our arm. Let's see how many verts do we have. We'll hold Alt, left click on this edge here. Beneath my mouse, you can see we have 9 verts. Okay, let's make this even. So I'm looking for where we can add another vertex in. I'm thinking right here. I'm going to hold Control, press R, then left click once, left click a second time to lock that in, then left click here, deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Okay, let's see how many verts we have. We're going to hold Alt, left click here. We have 10 verts now, which is good. Just taking a look. I'll left click to deselect. Okay, we have 10 vertices. So what we're going to do is go to object mode. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold shift and right click to put the 3D cursor right there. I'm going to hold Shift, press A. This brings up our Add to menu. We're going to select Cylinder. We want to change these vertices to 10. Where we see cap field type Ingon, we want to click here, change this to nothing. Now we're going to left click to deselect. Okay, we're going to click here, press S to scale on the Z axis like this. We'll press S to scale. We'll press R to rotate. S to scale. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Push this inside of the arm. We're going to click on, looks like a square, scroll down to the check mark next to in front. Okay, we're going to go to edit mode. Hold shift, press D to duplicate, right click. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. We're just trying to make sure this is inside of the sculpted mesh. We're going to hold shift, press D, right click. Trying to make sure that this is inside of the sculpted mesh. I'm going to press R to rotate. Making sure that's inside. R to rotate. I'm going to hold shift, press D, right click. Making sure this is inside of the sculpted mesh. That's what I'm doing as I'm rotating the view. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, we're going to go to object mode. Go to what looks like our wrench, which is our modifier menu. We're going to click add modifier. We're then going to select shrink wrap. Okay, we wanted these shapes inside of our mesh so that we could go to nearest surface point and then change this to project. We then want to go to where we see on surface. We're going to left click and then select above surface. We're then going to click the eyedropper, click on our sculpted mesh. And now we have this fairly nicely matching up with our sculpted mesh, the Retopology mesh that we're working on here. Okay, so now we're going to click apply. Now we're going to go to edit mode to our upper left. We're going to go to edge select. I'm going to hold Alt, click here, hold Shift, as well as Alt, click here. I'm going to hold Control, press E, select bridge edge loops. Then I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to do the same thing. Hold Alt, click here, hold Shift. While holding Alt, click here, hold Control, press E, select. This brings up our edges menu. When we press Control E, we're going to select bridge edge loops. I'm going to left click to deselect. We're going to do the same thing again. Hold Alt to select that edge loop. Hold Shift as well as Alt to select this edge loop. Hold Control, press E. This brings up our edges menu. We're going to select bridge edge loops. Then we're going to left click to deselect. Okay, now we're going to go to object mode. We're still on our modifier panel. We're going to click here, select shrink wrap. This time we're going to leave it at nearest surface point. We're going to click above surface. We're going to click the eyedropper. We're going to select the sculpted mesh. We're going to, while we're here, right click and then select shade smooth. Now we'll go to edit mode. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to hover here, hold Control while hovering here. While holding Control, press R, left click once, left click a second time to lock that in. We're going to hover here, hold Control, press R, left click once, left click a second time to lock that in. Then I'm going to left click here to deselect. So I clicked on nothingness to deselect. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the upper left-hand corner, click to go to object mode. We're then going to click apply to apply that shrink wrap modifier. Okay, with that applied, with this mesh selected first, we're going to hold Shift and then left click on we want the Retopology mesh. I'm going to left click off here. So I click there. So I have this selected again. I'm going to hold shift and click here. And we're still getting the sculpted mesh. So what I'm going to do is click here. This high poly mesh is the mesh that keeps getting selected. So I'm going to click this triangle here. So now I'll click here again. Hold shift now. Now click here. I can easily select this now. So with this selected first and this selected second, I'm going to hold Control and then press J. And what I did was I joined this mesh object to this mesh object. The reason why we got this on this side is because this mesh adopted the mirror modifier of this object. So with that done, we're going to left click here, go to edit mode. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in, hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view down. Okay, now we're going to join this piece to this piece. So we're on edge select. We're going to hold Alt, left click here, hold Shift, while holding Shift as well as Alt, left click here. I let go of Shift as well as Alt. Now I'm holding Control, pressing E. This brings up our Edges menu. I'm then going to select Bridge Edge Loops. I'm then going to left click to deselect. Okay, we're going to hover here, hold Control, press R, roll the mouse wheel once, left click a second time to lock that in. Left click on nothingness to deselect. So that's working out well. Okay, I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom out. See, there's an issue there, so I'm going to click on Vertex Select, click here, and just pull so those vertices are together. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. Okay, what we want to do is have a loop that comes down and goes around the knee. So if we go towards the right through our object button, scroll down and then take the check mark away from in front, we can see that the knee is right here, so the loop should be right here. So I'm going to click this, so the loop should go like this. Okay, so we're going to go to Edge Select. We're going to hover here, hold Alt. We're going to have our mouse beneath this selection. When we held Alt, we selected this whole edge loop. I'm going to press V, and that rips this. I'm going to right click to make that go back to its original location. I'm going to go to Face Select, press L, that selects all of this part right here. So we just separated this when we press that V. Now I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu. I'm then going to choose faces to delete. Okay, so we're going to turn our snapping back on. We want these two faces here. So what we're going to do is go to Edge Select, left click to deselect, click here. I'm rotating the mouse just to make it so we can't see the back geometry. I'm going to right click. I am then going to click here. So I'm skipping these two edges here. I'm going to rotate. See how when I rotate it here, you can see that. So I'm rotating down just to get that out of the way. Holding Control, then right clicking. Okay, so we want to run these edges into each other. So I'm going to left click here, hold Control, right click. I'm then going to go to, actually, you know what? I'm going to hold Shift, click here, press F to fill. I'm going to then left click to deselect. I'm going to go to Vertex Select, pull this to the side. I'm going to left click here. I'm holding Shift now. I'm going to press F. Left click here. I'm holding Shift now. I am then going to press F. Then I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to go to the Poly Build tool. I'm gonna left click and drag like this. Hold the mouse button. Left click and drag. I'll go to the wrench, turn off the mirror modifier. Left click and drag. Left click and drag. Holding shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Left click and drag. 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 I'm going to click here. Here is the upper left to select tool. I'm going to left click, hold all these, select all these vertices. I'm then going to press F to fill. I'm then going to left click to deselect. Roll the mouse wheel back. Taking a look at what we have. I'm going to press E to extrude. Take the manipulator, push this down. Press S to scale like that. Put that over. Left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to go to Vertex select. Hold Control and right click. Right click, and I'm just looking up here as I right click, trying to basically match up. So here, 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 here. So what we can do is let's go to Edge Select. Let's click here. Let's press F, 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 F. Go back to Vertex Select. I left clicked on nothingness to deselect. I'm gonna click here, hold Control, right click, right click, right click, click here, F, F, F. I'll go to Vertex Select, left click, hold Control, right click, left click on nothingness to deselect, click here, here being this edge, I'll press F. Okay, click here, hold Control, right click, click on this edge select, we'll press F, and then shift click here, then we'll press F. Left click on nothingness to deselect, hold the mouse button to rotate to view, holding Control as well as the mouse button hand. I'm going to click here to bring our mirror modifier back. Okay, we're going to go to Vertex Select, hold Alt, click. We're holding Alt so we can select this edge. We have 12 verts here. We're going to go to object mode. We're going to hold shift as well as the, while holding shift, we right clicked to put the 3D cursor here. We're going to hold shift, press A. We're going to go to mesh. We're going to go to cylinder. We have our cylinder options pop up over here. We're going to change this to 12. We're going to go to where we see cap fill, Ingon. We're going to change this to nothing. And then I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button. That's, oh, okay. Looked like it was half a mesh at first. I'm going to hold shift, press D. I duplicated this. I'm going to left click, pull this to the side. Oh, I have this on. That's snapping, so. Okay, so why are we doing this? we need a loop going around the foot, so we're gonna press S to scale on the Z axis like that. We're gonna press R to rotate on the X axis 90, then left click to lock that in. Let's click this, move that out of the way. We're gonna press S to scale, so that's inside of this mesh right here. Okay, so I'm trying to use the shrink wrap project right here. The main reason I'm doing that is for speed. You can just take your vertices and go around this. I'm just trying to find ways to make this somewhat faster, or what I think would be faster. So I'm going to click Add Modifier, Shrink Wrap. I'm going to go to Nearest Surface Point, change this to Project. Where we see On Surface, I'm going to click and change this to Above Surface. Okay, so with that selected, I'm going to go to our brush, our ink dropper, click on our mesh. No, that's right. I have the mesh, so you can't click on it. We have to click. See this high poly here? I have to click to turn that on. Now I can use the eyedropper. That's interesting. Okay, there it is. Okay, so to see this, we need to click here, put a check mark next to so this actually is doing what we want it to do. So I'm going to click back on the wrench. I'm then going to click Apply. Okay, with this selected, I'm going to hold Shift. Click on our Retopology mesh, hold Control, press J. So now this is joined to that, and I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to select this cylinder. I'm going to press S to scale on the Z axis like that. Okay, I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view, hold Shift, bring that down, push this over so it's in front, push this so this is inside. I'm going to press S to scale. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. This looks like it's in a good position. I'm going to click Add Modifier, go to Shrink Wrap Modifier. I'm going to change the nearest surface point to Project. Change On Surface to Above Surface. I'm going to click on the ink dropper and then select the Sculpted mesh. That looks good. Okay, so I'm going to go to Apply. With this still selected, I'm going to hold Shift. While holding Shift, left click here, hold Control, press J. So now this part of the mesh is one with that part of the mesh. Okay, I'm going to go to Edit Mode. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to go to Face Select, click here, press X to bring up our Delete menu, then choose Faces to delete. Go to Edge Select, click here. And you know what? I'll go to Face Select, click here, press X, choose Faces to delete. Go to Edge, select, left click here, hold Shift, click here, press F to fill, left click on nothingness, I'll left click here, hold Shift, click here, then press F to fill, I'll then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. Hold Shift as well as the mouse button to pan. Okay, I'm going to go to Face Select, click here, press X, then choose Faces to delete. I'm going to click here, press X, choose Faces to delete. Then I'm going to click, well, go to Edge Select, click here, hold Shift, then click here, then press F to fill. Click here, hold Shift, then press F to fill, then left click to deselect. I'm going to hold Control as well as the no mouse button. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to click to turn the modifier off. Not turn it off, make it not visible. I'm going to go to click this right here. Press R to rotate. I'm going to hold the no mouse button. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to hold Control, press R, roll the mouse wheel once to put in two loop cuts, and left click once, left click a second time to lock that in, left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold Control, press R, roll the mouse wheel once, left click a second time to lock that in, then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, we're going to turn snapping back on. Be very careful. I'm going to click here, press G, left click, click here, press G, left click. Click here, press G, left click. When I click and then press G, G makes the edge snap to the mesh underneath. I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hover here, hold Control, right click, left click once, left click a second time, then press G. Left click, there we go. I'm going to hover here, hold Control, press R, left click once, left click a second time, press G. I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom out. There's three faces right here. I'm going to go outside of the three faces. I'm going to hold Control to get two faces here. I'm going to hold Control to get one over the top. I'm going to hold Control, hold Shift, then I'm going to press F to fill. Then I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate. I see this line here, so I'm going to hold Control, press R, left click once, left click a second time to lock that in. I'm going to click here, hold Shift, well, let go of Shift. I'm going to go to the Select tool, then click here. And then I'm going to hold Control, press E, select Bridge Edge Loops, and then left click to deselect. I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I want to connect here, so I'm going to hold Control, press R, left click a second time, left click on nothingness to deselect. Hold Shift. Well, I clicked here, now I'm holding Shift. Still holding Shift. I'm going to hold Control, press E, select Bridge Edge Loops, and left click on nothingness to deselect.